Today, we are diving into a pain that is, well, universally familiar, the toothache. We're about to uncover the surprisingly long, and let's be honest, often brutal, 7,000-year history of how humanity has fought this exact battle.
I want you to just think about the last time you had a really bad toothache. You know, that throbbing, just relentless pain. Okay, now, imagine having that same pain, but there's no dentist. There are no painkillers, no modern medicine whatsoever. It's a feeling we can all, unfortunately, relate to, and it's the perfect starting point for our story.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the problem itself, then dig into the supernatural explanations people came up with. From there, we'll look at the brutal physical cures, the very first attempts to actually fix teeth, and finally, the revolution that changed everything: prevention.
All right, first up, let's establish a simple fact. Tooth pain has been the great equalizer throughout all of human history. It didn't matter if you were a peasant or a poet, it was coming for you.
The absolute earliest evidence we have of any kind of dental work comes from a site in modern-day Pakistan, and it dates back 7,000 years. Archaeologists there found human teeth that had been drilled into, most likely with these primitive stone-tipped bow drills. I mean, can you even imagine the level of desperation someone must have felt to let another person grind a rock into their tooth just for a tiny bit of relief?
And it proves that no amount of fame or fortune could save you from this. The great poets of ancient China, they wrote all about their dental misery. Han Yu was so bummed about losing his teeth, he said he could only watch other people eat. Bai Jui was literally bedridden for days. And my favorite, Du Fu, complained that his toothache completely ruined his mood while he was out house hunting. It really was a universal pain.
So, if you have a mysterious, agonizing pain deep inside your head, and you have zero science to explain it, what do? Well, for most of human history, the answer was pretty simple. You blame the supernatural.
And the world's first, and by far the most dominant dental theory was the toothworm. For literally thousands of years, people all across the globe were absolutely convinced that a tiny worm lived inside their teeth and that its burrowing was causing all their pain. It sounds completely wild to us now, right? But for them, it was the only thing that made sense.
And you can see just how deeply this idea was embedded in culture, right in the language itself. The ancient Chinese character for a cavity, ku, is basically a perfect picture of the theory. It literally shows the symbol for tooth with the symbol for worm right inside it.
And this wasn't just some local superstition. Oh no, the toothworm theory was a global phenomenon. From ancient Egypt to Mesopotamia to ancient Rome and even all the way to Shakespearean England, you have all these cultures with no contact with each other, all coming to the exact same conclusion: a worm did it.
So, naturally, if a worm is the problem, the cure is to get the worm out. In Egypt, they tried to smoke it out with fragrant incense. Over in Britain, they'd have the patient inhale fumes from burning henbane seeds, which is a hallucinogen, by the way, and then lean over a bowl of water. They believed the worms would fall out, though it's way more likely the patient was just, seeing things.
So when magic and superstition inevitably failed, which they always did, humanity turned to a more direct approach. And without anesthetics or antibiotics, this approach was often just plain terrifying.
The tools they used tell a really scary story all on their own. The Greeks used these soft lead pliers, but they were only strong enough for teeth that were already loose. By the 15th century, you get the pelican forceps, shaped like a bird's beak that used brutal leverage to just rip a tooth out. Then came the 18th century dental key, a terrifying tool you'd insert, twist, and just pray it pulled the tooth without breaking your jaw along with it.
But here's the thing. Extraction was always the absolute last resort. Even the great medieval Arab physician Abulcasis, who designed hundreds of surgical tools, warned against it. He knew that pulling a tooth was a final, irreversible, and deeply dangerous thing to do.
And the dangers were very, very real. We have this record from China's Jin dynasty about an official named Wen Qiao. He had a tooth pulled, and then he suffered a stroke, probably from the trauma or a raging infection, and he died less than 10 days later. As far as we know, it's the first recorded case of someone dying from a dental procedure.
In some cases, people just got desperate and took matters into their own hands. Get this, Viking skeletons found in Sweden show teeth that have been deliberately filed down. Researchers are pretty sure this wasn't for decoration. It was probably an agonizing form of self-treatment meant to relieve the intense pressure from a badly infected tooth.
But hey, pulling teeth wasn't the only answer. While some folks were developing better ways to yank teeth out, a few innovators were trying to figure out how to actually save them. This was the very beginning of restorative dentistry.
Okay, so check out this recipe for a filling from Han Dynasty China. You'd grind up some herbs and a mineral called realgar, mix it into a paste with pig lard, and then pack it into the cavity with a heated stick. The problem? When you heat realgar, it creates arsenic trioxide. That's right, arsenic. It might have killed the nerve pain, but you were literally packing poison into your own mouth. But, they learned and they improved. Another Han Dynasty recipe used a much safer herbal paste. The real leap forward, though, came in the Tang Dynasty. They invented something called silver paste, a mixture of mercury and silver. This was basically an early form of amalgam, the same concept that would be used in fillings for over 1,000 years to come.
And what about the ancient version of a root canal? Well, brace yourself. Both Roman and Chinese doctors figured out the basic idea. If the nerve is causing the pain, you have to kill the nerve. Their solution? Drill a hole into the tooth and then insert a red-hot iron rod to destroy the nerve before filling it up. Incredibly painful, I'm sure, but apparently it worked.
But you see, all of these cures, the drilling, the pulling, the fillings, they were all reactive. They were about dealing with the problem after it already started. The true revolution, the real game changer, came when humanity finally figured out the real solution, preventing the problem in the first place.
And the first steps were actually pretty simple. People used toothpicks, and some of them were quite fancy, made of gold or ivory, to clean between their teeth. They came up with mouth rinses using things like salt water, strong tea, or even wine. And a lot of cultures, like the Babylonians, would chew on willow branches. The frayed ends acted like a pretty effective, all-natural toothbrush.
But the real MVP, the invention that changed everything, came from China. The earliest known toothbrush, with a handle made of bone or bamboo and bristles from a pig's neck, was invented during the Tang Dynasty. By the Song Dynasty, these were super common, and they even had the very first toothpaste to go with it, a fragrant paste made of spices and mint.
And here's the part that just blows my mind. Listen to this advice from scribes in the Song Dynasty. They recommended that it's more effective to brush your teeth before bed than in the morning, and that you should always use a soft bristled brush to protect your gums. That is perfectly in line with modern science. It took the rest of the world centuries to catch up to that kind of wisdom.
So after this whole 7,000-year journey, it all comes back to a pretty simple choice. If you were suddenly sent back in time with that awful, familiar, agonizing pain, what would you do? Would you just suffer in silence, blaming the toothworm? Or would you take a chance on the stone drill, the poison filling, or the red-hot poker? It's a question that makes you really, really grateful for modern dentistry. Thanks for watching.